and start that right now. All right. Excellent. Well, so excited to be here. And as Arun said, we are going to be here talking about specifically chapter 8 of Leading Through Free Fall, which is called Tame the Skeptics. So, to kick us off, I just want to just give a sense of what is Leading Through Free Fall. If you're not familiar with the book and you haven't had the chance to read any of it, no worries. You don't need to really get the most out of today. But specifically, Leading Through Free Fall has been written for people who consider themselves to be organizational change makers. Now, that can take a lot of different roles in terms of things that you might do. Clearly we're here. Many of you are service designers. You are change makers, really, sparking and catalyzing change within your different organizations. And so what Leading Through Free Fall does is it offers real stories for how to overcome roadblocks and then really help your teams and stakeholders to unleash stuck energy that might be behind the various different initiatives that you're working on. And so in it is 17 tools to really support that activity, and it's organized in 3 different stages. So you've got suiting up, free fall, and safe landing. Specifically, the chapter I'm going to share with you today is really about the free fall. It's all these things that might end up happening that kind of come out of left field. You cannot predict them, but you basically are needing to react to them. And hopefully you're reacting to them with grace instead of frustration as we go through. And so to kind of help us to get into this, I want to just sort of set some context. So chapter 8, Tame the Skeptics. My organization, the case study that's featured in this specific chapter, we were working with a healthcare device manufacturer at this time. And so what had happened is they had recently upgraded their product. They would have considered it a sort of a next version, not a next gen. So they had upgraded, a series of features associated with it. The team who had been working on that from a product perspective had done a significant amount of design research. They were very proud of that work, felt it had been done to the right rigor, were super excited to release the product out into the market, feeling as though it was going to be a net positive for all of their clients. And what ended up happening once that release occurred is basically their clients started calling the organization and wanted to cancel their contracts. So you can imagine that was not something that the team was expecting. It was something that they were super baffled by. And that was ultimately the sort of the trigger or the moment that then ended up bringing my organization, Sylver Consulting, into the dialogue. And so what happened here is, we said, all right, we have to first just understand, where did things go wrong? And so, my hunch was that it's probably going wrong because their definition, my client's definition of customer success, was probably not the same as their client's definition of customer success. And so we structured the engagement as a series of 7 different workshops, the first one starting off with them internally. And it was a 2-day workshop. It was meant to really understand collectively from the organization, what did they consider customer success to be? What did it look like? How did they deliver it? Everything of that nature. And so, the goal is then once we understood that, we would go around to key clients, better understand what success meant from their point of view, and then figure out where they were aligned and where they might have been, incongruent with one another. And so, we had this plan. It was all locked down. We had to get that first two days of workshop. All the top levels of leadership were brought into that plan. And then the day before the 2-day cross-functional workshop was about to begin, half of the people who were attending that meeting canceled their attendance to the meeting, all within the same 30 minutes of time. And so it was very clear that this was a premeditated situation. It was very much an orchestrated situation. It was very much an awkward situation. And so, but we knew that we couldn't move forward if we didn't have everybody on board. And so it required me, it was a mid-sized organization. It required me then calling the president, which was also super uncomfortable for me at that moment in my career. But it required me calling the president and basically giving a sense of what had happened and then defining what was going to happen as a result. And so what did happen is that, he basically sent out a notification to his team members reminding them that this particular workshop was not optional, it was mandatory, and that there would be consequences if they chose to not show up the next morning. So you can imagine, right? Here we have a 2-day workshop planned. We basically have, people like a full-on rebellion happening. The president kind of throwing down the gauntlet, saying you're either there or else. And so as we show up into the room the next morning, to say that the tension was thick is kind of an understatement. And it was also a situation where we couldn't start where we thought we were going to start. I think daggers and ice might better describe kind of the energy of that moment. And so what I had here, and this is sort of the topic of the Tame the Skeptics, is I had to figure out, like, what do I do? Because I have a 2-day workshop that, is going to maximize every hour and every second of that 2-day workshop. But I also have basically a mutiny on my hands. And so the first thing I had to do is I had to diagnose what's the type of skepticism that I was dealing with. And so when you're working on any initiative and working with any stakeholders, there's sort of 3 different types of skepticism, and you're going to deal with them slightly differently. So the first is just a slight skepticism. And so this is, maybe when people are, they're not 100% behind the process, but they're still showing up. There's a level of like, I'm going to trust the process. And so in this type of situation, you're just going to kind of keep moving, and you're going to let people really experience the process, the tools, the frameworks, the user stories, understanding the value of bringing users into the design of things. And through that actual experience, they're going to build more confidence in the process. You can also have moderate skepticism. And so this is when, maybe they're questioning a little bit more, like, what is the outcome of this? How is it going to be used? And so here you want to pause the work a little bit, and you just want to give space to really surface, concerns directly and kind of bring that skepticism out in the open, the fears of why they think that this might be a waste of their time. And then you also then have strong skepticism. And this is when basically we're a situation like we are, right? Where there's a huge mutiny. People have stopped showing up. They've stopped putting their time into it. And here you need to pause and really address the root issues and kind of create that space for more candid group conversation that's going to reinforce, why this effort matters, why their participation in the effort matters. So based on the story that I just told you, we were definitely in that strong skepticism space. There was no belief in the value of the initiative. Definitely everybody was completely, concerned about wasting their time. Another contextual thing related to this particular initiative is they had grown and scaled so fast, but their processes were not scaled to support it. So people were working overtime. And so they were just exhausted too. And then there was definitely no trust in me as a leader of this initiative. I actually had somebody said to me, what could you possibly offer to us? You're not a nurse, And so, and basically in less than 24 hours, I had, a team that I thought was ready to be in lockstep with me. And then, one that was very uncertain of that. So basically how I handled that situation is I engaged an exercise that's called the group loop. And so what this looked like is, I didn't start the agenda where I had it. I didn't push through, which can be the temptation, but rather I started the meeting by saying, I know that half of the people in this room would rather be anywhere else but here today. And so the way that we are going to start this conversation is that we're going to go around the room. We're going to go around the room 3 times. We're going to go around the room person by person in a round robin style, and you're going to tell me what is making you concerned and uncomfortable about being here today. And each time that this question comes around to you, you're going to answer it again, and you're going to answer it, with whatever comes to the top of your mind. And so basically I had Post-it board all over the room, and we went around and I would ask the first person, what's making you concerned or uncomfortable about being here today? They would share their response. I put it on the Post-it board and I simply said, thank you. And then I moved to the next person and I asked, what's making you concerned or uncomfortable about being here today? Put the response on the Post-it board and then said thank you, and did that 3 times around the room. So there was roughly about 24 people there. And so when we got done, we had basically post-it board after post-it board of specific responses to this question. And then we went back to each one, and I then was able to then say, this is where this particular concern or discomfort is going to be addressed in the program that we have planned over the course of those 7 workshops. Or, if it wasn't going to be addressed in that particular project or program that we had scoped out, specifically stated that. And in many cases at that moment, put the president on the hot seat and basically said, Jim, how do you plan to address this? And so what this did is it just really sort of disarmed everyone in being able to just come into this space with a little bit more grace and willingness to kind of walk through it. But had we started it where we had planned, it wouldn't have happened. But what did happen is after an hour, all of the energy, that negative energy, was diffused a bit, at least enough where we could start the agenda. And then by lunch, everyone in the room agreed that the conversation that was taking shape was indeed valuable and meaningful for their 2-day commitment. And then at the end of the program, so after all of the 7 workshops, the woman who had sparked the mass decline of invites actually came up to hug me, and she apologized, saying that the program and the work we did in it was some of the most important work that she had done in her career up to that point in time. So super uncomfortable space to be in. I'm sure everybody's saying in their minds, like, I would not want to be there. You don't. But it was a way that supported us to really get the work done when, a typical MO might be to sort of push through. And so what I want you all to do is I want you to be able to experience this group loop activity today. Now, we're going to do it a little bit more positive because you all actually made the intention to show up today. But I want you to experience what it is like to be the question asker as well as the question responder. And so what you're going to do is you're going to be put into groups of 2. And, you're going to choose who's going to start first. Each of you are going to have 3 minutes. And so if you are the question asker, you're going to basically say only 2 things throughout the entire time that you're asking the other person who's in your room a question. The first thing that you're going to say is you're going to ask the question. So, why did you choose to prioritize this time for yourself today? And then the person is going to respond back to you. And, if they respond in 30 seconds, if they respond in 10 seconds or a minute, you're just going to listen, you're going to take it in. And then when they are done, you're going to say thank you. And then you're going to say their name again. And you're going to say, why did you choose to prioritize this time for yourself today? And then they're going to respond. You're going to say thank you. And then why did you choose to prioritize this time for yourself today? Now, what is going to happen is you're going to get uncomfortable when you're the person who's responding, but you're going to also keep going deeper in your responses to that question. So each person's going to have 3 minutes, to be in each of those roles. I'll send out a message at the mid-mark and tell you to kind of to switch to the second person. And in about 7 minutes, we're going to come back together and we're going to do some debrief of what that experience was like for you, and then be able to open up to Q&A. So with that, Arun, if you were the one controlling the breakout rooms, I think we are good to open them up.